What's up guys, welcome to this special video. We all know what the best films of last year were. I shared my personal favourite best films of last year, although I'm changing that a little bit now. But what were the best films of the last decade? A lot of people have been doing this, so I decided to do it as well. So the decade starting in 2010, ending in 2019, I've went and selected one film from every one of those years as what I think is the best. Now, please note, best is different from favourite. In some areas, they might be the same thing. And as always, I'm only going to be talking about the films I've actually seen. So if a film isn't brought up, chances are I either didn't like it as much as you think I should, or I just haven't seen it. So let's get straight into it. 2010, Inception. So Inception, this is an example of what I think is the best film of that year and what is my favourite film of that year being the same thing. Inception, a Christopher Nolan film, I think a Christopher Nolan masterpiece. It's got a timey-wimey, convoluted, mind-bending story and plot which you have to really pay attention to and focus on, otherwise you're going to be completely lost. There's emotion in there for the characters, there are big stakes in there, there's a science fiction elements, cool action, great lines of dialogue, there's a whole brilliant visual look to it, very inspired by On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the James Bond movie. This is just a great science fiction action thriller. 2011, My Week with Marilyn. So My Week with Marilyn is a biopic focusing on a very specific time period in Marilyn Monroe's life and career when she came to the UK to make a film. But she was having some personal problems with her at the time husband, and she was having some sort of romantic connection with another individual at this time as well. So this is one of these biopics that doesn't try to be grand and cover the whole career or the life of the individual, and that's smart because there's a lot going on in Marilyn Monroe's life. This is one that's very focused, very specific, anchored by brilliant performances across the board, but of course Michelle Williams as Marilyn Monroe is spot on, just perfect. There's elements of comedy in there. It makes you really relate to the character and the individual that was Marilyn Monroe in ways that a lot of times before this was only alluded to. Marilyn Monroe is a fascinating individual who, if you've got any interest in film, you really should look her up. But I just think this film perfectly captures who Marilyn Monroe was, according to all what we know. Anyone around today probably doesn't actually know her, but you know, it gives a great idea of who she was, what she was like, what her life was like, and that's what a biopic's all about, while also being entertaining and insightful. 2012, Skyfall. So Skyfall, the 50th anniversary of James Bond. So they celebrated it with the Daniel Craig movie, essentially bringing elements from all the James Bond films into one. There are references and homages to pretty much every James Bond film in this movie. Some subtle, some big, some which kind of don't make too much sense in the whole Daniel Craig era of Bond, but it's kind of one of them things where you just kind of ignore it and move on and have fun with it. So this is the Daniel Craig era James Bond. It is a standalone Bond movie for the most part. Daniel Craig anchoring himself now as the best Bond. This is a visually stunning film, great score and soundtrack by Adele. Judi Dench this time around is essentially the Bond girl, which is brilliant. Honestly, this is just a great James Bond film that stands alone and also fits into the Daniel Craig era really well, and it pays homage and respects to the James Bond franchise. 2013, The Wolf of Wall Street. So The Wolf of Wall Street, I think, is Martin Scorsese's best film. It's certainly his funniest film. And you could argue it's a comedy. You could also argue it's a drama or a thriller. It's very much in the same vein in terms of the way the story is told as like Goodfellas or something, only it's making it much more humorous and light-hearted in a way. It's a gangster film that's not focused on gangsters. It's a gangster film that's focused on a very different kind of crime in stock market brokers and scandalous things like that. So Leonardo DiCaprio, brilliant performance from him. Margot Robbie bursting onto the scene here, and this made her career essentially for one or two reasons. And this is Martin Scorsese's first film shot digitally. It's very colourful, very bright, great comedy in there, great performances. It's got everything, and of course it's 3 hours long, so you know, make sure you're comfortable. 2014, Birdman. So Birdman is a film that reinvigorated the career of Michael Keaton, and it's one of his best performances. Hell, it probably is his best performance. This is all about art and artistry and actors and directors and filmmakers. What motivates them, what gets them going, what gets me going. So one of the reasons I like this film so much is that I related to it big time. The balance of trying to create something that's artistic and meaningful and that actually works, while also trying to balance that out with entertainment and not trying to sell out too much and trying to get all the different areas of it. Now this is of course focused on a stage play, but it relates to all sorts of things like writing stories or novels or films, TV, video games, whatever it is. If you're a creative individual, this film is going to resonate for you because it handles all the struggles that those individuals and myself have. There's also the actual filmic side of this, how it was made. It was made using one long taken shot. Of course it wasn't actually, it's actually just editing trickery, and you can actually see where the edits are if you know what to look for. But it works really well. It gives the impression that you're constantly just there experiencing their life as it happens. There's also a great soundtrack and score with a lot of drum beats. It can give you a bit of a headache, but it works really well, and it gets you right in the zone and feeling exactly what the main characters are feeling, because it's about frustrations and stress and tension building up. Yeah, I just can't praise this film enough. 2015, Ex Machina. So Ex Machina, Alex Garland directed and written film. It's a science fiction film, a very focused science fiction film, a small scale science fiction film, let's say, about an individual who goes to this big company boss's house to do a Turing test on the new android to see if he can figure out if it's an android or not. And Alicia Vikander in a career-making role, I would say. Domhnall Gleeson in there, and you've also got Oscar Isaac in there as well. It's hardcore science fiction. A lot of science fiction things going on. It makes you think about ideas and grand schemes and so on. Visuals are great. It is a small scale thing, so it's set in a believable, realistic world, but with certain science fiction elements in there. The CGI works really well. Alicia Vikander, most of her body is CGI for the majority of the film, and it works really well. It looks great. There are some twists and turns in there. It's thrilling at times. There's a romantic element in there that works really well. The performances are brilliant. This is just a great film across the board. I also want to give a shout out to this year to Star Wars The Force Awakens, which brought back Star Wars in a big way. But for technical, complicated reasons, I'm not going to consider it the best film of this year. But I do think it's damn good and impressive that it brought back Star Wars in such a big way. 2016, Captain America Civil War. So Captain America Civil War brought the Avengers together, only slightly differently. Instead of teaming up, they were fighting each other. And the reason this film is so good is because it builds off everything that came before it, and it ties into the character motivations, their backstories, all the events of the previous films. It actually makes everything relevant and important, because now there is this big issue that the characters have to debate about and deal with. But of course they all end up on different sides of the table, which brings them into conflict with each other. There's some wider scale issues in there, then there's some really personal nitty-gritty issues in there as well. And the film manages to do the grand big set pieces well and the emotional smaller stories well in the same regard. Nothing in the film is treated unfairly or as if one thing is better or more important than the other. So Civil War has something for everyone, with great performances, great action, great CGI and special effects, an interesting, compelling villain, and also much more. 2017, Blade Runner 2049. I think this film is a masterpiece, plain and simple, and I think it was criminally overlooked in both commercial and critical regard. Now critically it did get brilliant reviews, but I think it should have been nominated for best films and all those big awards instead of just the visual effects and special features and all that lot. Blade Runner 2049, a sequel to the original Blade Runner, and I think a much, much better film than the original Blade Runner. This is Denis Villeneuve. It's visually stunning across the board. Like, you could pause this film at any individual point and there you got a huge, brilliant, gorgeous portrait which you could hang up on your wall. It's great. Ryan Gosling in the lead role this time. Harrison Ford shows up again in one of his best performances, I would say. Certainly one of his more emotional performances. The special effects are brilliant, some of the best I've ever seen. The way in which they've created this cyberpunk, almost dystopian future is incredible. Especially when half the special effects look like they were practical and real. Of course, there was CGI in there as well. But yeah, there's a great storyline there too, which sets up things which could happen in future Blade Runner films, but chances are, because of how poorly this film did in the box office, that might not happen, which is really disappointing. But yeah, this I think really is a masterpiece. 2018, Avengers Infinity War. So like Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War brought everything together. This time though, it was all the characters, all the locations, every minute little plot point became relevant again as the big bad showed up. Thanos finally arrived and everyone had to team up and unite to take him down. And what happened? They lost. Spoilers, they lost. This is a brilliant superhero film that shows that even at the lowest, worst point, that's still an important part of a person's life because you've got to build up from that. Hell, at the end of this film, half of the heroes are dead. That's incredible. How many superhero films end where the heroes not only lose, but half of them are gone? I mean, it's just unthinkable. It doesn't happen. And that's why this film stands out. It's shocking, there are twists, there are brilliant action scenes, great emotional moments in there too. Everything comes together in a way that it really shouldn't. On paper, this should not work, but it does. There are so many moving parts and everything gets the right amount of time and moments that it just works. It's incredible. 2019. So if you watched my best films of 2019 video, you'll know that at top of my list was The Irishman. Well, I've seen the film that came out in 2019 originally, although it was 2020 here in the UK, and I think this is the new top of that list. Parasite. So Parasite, a South Korean movie. This is a film I'm not going to describe too much at all. I don't want to give away what it's about. Suffice to say, it's about a family, a very unique, quirky individual family, very reminiscent in my opinion to the characters in the TV show Shameless. But this family meets another family and tries to do some stuff with that family. And it goes from there. I would say the first half of the film is one thing. It's very almost generic thriller, not generic, but typical thriller elements. And then there are twists and turns which take things from one high to another to another. It's constantly moving forward. There's constantly upping the stakes and upping the ante. And that's why this film's so good. You don't see what's coming. But then there is some foreshadowing in there and it's brilliantly done. There's constant, the use of camera work, for example, focusing on things in the background in subtle ways that make you realize that, yeah, that's going to be important later on. You just can't figure out how. And then there are little mentions of certain things here and there which become relevant later on. This is just genius, both in the writing and the directing regard. Of course, the characters are brilliant too. Very quirky, very likable. Visually, it's fine. Obviously, this is primarily set in one house, one location, so there's not too much to go on. But the house is great. The house itself is a character. It's really well fleshed out. Yeah, just a brilliant film. Please get over the fact that it's South Korean. You can read subtitles. Come on. But those are my best films of the generation, of the decade, 2010 to 2019. If I had to pick one though, what would be my number one? Blade Runner 2049. Really, I do like that film a lot. And I can't praise it enough. I do think it deserved more than what it got. So, you're probably disagreeing with my choices here. That's perfectly fine. Leave them in the comments and feedback down below. Let me know what your films of the decade were. And of course, subscribe to my channel if you want more content like this. The more subscribers I get, the more content I can make. And of course, go on to Twitter and Instagram. Follow me at _GrantBurton if you want my up-to-date opinions and thoughts and whatever else. That's where you go. Also, I'm on Letterboxd now, so if you want some of my written reviews, if you want me to give films scores and so on, follow me on there. Same place, _GrantBurton. Until next time though, thanks for watching.